The chair may declare the committee in recess at any point. Today's field hearing will explore how the public and private sectors can work together to address the economic models of cybersecurity. To do this, we will examine the cyber threat landscape, cyber regulations, and the technology that will improve America's cybersecurity posture. I want to thank the members of the committee who made it out for this and took time to join us here in Silicon Valley. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Well, good afternoon, and I want to thank all of you for coming today. The topic is one that is incredibly important for our country, and I thank the Hoover Institution for hosting this on such an incredibly beautiful campus. And I don't know who brought the weather here. Is it like this all the time? I mean, it's incredible. It's not a coincidence that we're holding today's hearing here in the middle of Silicon Valley. Since World War II, Silicon Valley has been the world's shining example of what a nation can accomplish when innovation is unleashed. It's the home of some of America's most talented and creative minds, innovators who are spearheading major breakthroughs in technological development. From semiconductors to social media, Silicon Valley has produced innovations that have changed the way we work, communicate, and complete our daily tasks. As we know, great technological advancements come with great responsibility. I'm here today to emphasize the importance of prioritizing our cybersecurity as we build new capabilities that will continue to change the world. And I have prioritized cybersecurity for myself in this Congress and for the Committee on Homeland Security. And I hope the industry partners that are here and across the country will join us in this mission to improve our cyber resilience against nation states as well as criminal actors, strengthen our offensive posture, and develop new capabilities that incorporate security from the start. I strongly believe that allowing American innovation to flourish is critical to strengthening our national security. And that's why we must start by injecting some common sense into the regulatory regime. The increasingly burdensome, costly, and duplicative requirements placed on our innovators are stifling our innovation and hindering our national security. Instead, we must continue to explore technological solutions for regulatory compliance and ways that we as Congress can help deconflict and simplify cyber regulations. This priority pairs well with another focus of mine this Congress, changing the economic models of cybersecurity. The costs and incentives associated with cybersecurity are currently imbalanced in favor of the attacker rather than the defender. According to a report by IBM, the global average cost of a data breach in 2024 was nearly $4.9 million. In many cases, to inflict multi-million-dollar damage on U.S. businesses, attackers only need some degree of technical knowledge and a laptop, a fraction of the costs faced by their victims. Fixing the economic models of cybersecurity will require a concentrated effort across industry and our government. First, we must raise the cost of cyber attacks for our adversaries, from strengthening our offensive posture in cyberspace to creating innovative cybersecurity solutions. The United States must make it more challenging and costly for adversaries to strike. Secondly, we must ensure that American businesses, especially private owners and operators of critical infrastructure, are investing heavily in cybersecurity. There needs to be a greater demand for products designed with cybersecurity in mind, accompanied by a supply shift toward more secure information technology and operational technology. There is an undisputable connection between what happens here in Silicon Valley and the security of U.S. critical infrastructure. The technology and cybersecurity solutions produced here have applications across all critical infrastructure sectors. By improving investment in cybersecurity and raising costs for our adversaries, the entire nation will be more secure. Cybersecurity truly is a team sport. Our collective defense against cyber threats relies upon private-public partnerships and information sharing. We want to turn that information sharing into action. And I'm grateful for Chairman Garbarino's efforts to preserve and enhance these partnerships, including through the reauthorization of CISIS 2015, and I look forward to discussing other ways to strengthen public-private partnerships in cybersecurity. I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. I look forward to discussing the current threat landscape with each of you and to examine ways that we can realign the economic models of cybersecurity. Our discussion will position us well to delve into finding solutions with some of our nation's most prominent innovators during the breakout session that follows this hearing. We have much more work to get done and to get to where we need to be, but I'm confident that if we work toward these objectives together, we will accomplish our mission. I look forward to the effort. I'd now like to recognize the chairman of the subcommittee on cybersecurity and Homeland Security Committee, Mr. Garbarino from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for having this hearing. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to join our nation's innovators today here in Silicon Valley. Thank you for your interest in our hearing and your partnership. Our enemies aggressively target U.S. critical infrastructure through novel techniques and persistent campaigns. Volt and Salt Typhoon, two China-backed threat actors, demonstrate that America's foreign adversaries are intent on finding opportunities to exploit our cybersecurity weaknesses wherever they can. It is therefore crucial that America's cybersecurity capabilities remain ahead of our adversaries. Bolstering cybersecurity resilience requires a whole-of-society approach, one that unlocks full potential of our innovative capacity to address and prevent vulnerabilities in our IT and OT. The companies here in Silicon Valley are often on the front lines of cybersecurity defense, and they will help develop solutions to bolster our ability to counter these threats. Ensuring we develop and use the right cybersecurity solutions requires a strong partnership between the public and private sectors. The foundation of this collaboration is information sharing, a key focus for my subcommittee this Congress. Information sharing between the public and private sectors is beneficial not only for staying ahead of threat actors, but also for driving innovation to where it is needed most. By sharing information about emerging threats and empowering CISA to manage cross-sectoral relationships, information sharing will help develop the tools we need to understand how threat actors operate in cyberspace. Innovation plays a critical role in keeping up with new tactics, techniques, and procedures of our adversaries in an increasingly active threat environment. As part of our continued prioritization of information sharing, my subcommittee recently held a hearing on an important authority, the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2015, otherwise known as CISA 2015. Information sharing between the public and private sectors heavily relies upon this act, so it is imperative that Congress reauthorizes CISA 2015 before it expires later this year. I was encouraged by Secretary Noem's statements in support of reauthorizing CISA 2015 when she came before the full committee just a few weeks ago, and look forward to working with the administration to do so in the coming months. Regulatory harmonization is another important topic that we will discuss during today's hearing. This is a topic which my subcommittee has explored extensively, especially in the context of CERCIA, the Cyber Incident Reporting of Critical Infrastructure Act of 2022. Industry's feedback is critical to obtain an effective final rule that meets congressional intent, which is why I look forward to hearing your perspectives on the current regulatory landscape. I'm also aware of the importance of providing for an ex parte process as rulemaking moves forward. This is something Secretary Noem has committed to providing, which will hopefully help remedy the rule's current shortfalls. Our expert panelists have led the charge in protecting the United States from threats to our cybersecurity. I look forward to hearing from your insights into what strategies we can take to promote cybersecurity, innovation, and best practices. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Garbarino. And it's always difficult to have an official hearing in your own district. This happens to be Mr. Swalwell's district, and I'm certain, as I would be if we were having this hearing in my district, pulled in 1,000 different ways. So we'll have him make his opening comments after our witnesses if he gets here by then. I'm pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses with us today. Their incredible experience in this evolving landscape of cyber, whether in government or private sector, will help shed a lot of light today on the challenges and solutions that we need in cyberspace. I'll ask the witnesses to stand and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Please be seated. I'd now like to formally introduce our witnesses. The Honorable H.R. McMaster is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. He's a proud graduate of West Point and served as a commissioned officer in the United States Army for 34 years, retiring in the rank of Lieutenant General in 2018. He won the Silver Star as a company commander in one of history's very most famous tank battles in Desert Storm. He served as the nation's 25th National Security Advisor from 2017 to 2018. Ms. Wendy Whitmore is the Chief Security Intelligence Officer at Palo Alto Networks. She is a globally recognized cybersecurity leader with 2 decades of experience in building incident response and threat intelligence teams. She began her career as a special agent conducting computer crimes investigation with the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Ms. Jeanette Manfra, did I pronounce that correctly? Okay. Is the Global Director for the Security and Compliance at Google Cloud. Prior to joining Google, she served as the Assistant Director for Cybersecurity at CISA. Ms. Manfra spent more than a decade serving in various roles at the Department of Homeland Security and the White House, focused on establishing the nation's first civilian cyber defense agency. Jeanette is a proud veteran of the U.S. Army and I believe an Army aviator. Mr. Jack Cable is the CEO and co-founder of Corridor, an organization that helps companies performing AI-powered security refractors at scale. He previously served as a senior technical advisor at CISA, where he helped lead the work on Secure by Design and open source software security. I thank our witnesses for being here today, and I now recognize General McMaster for 5 minutes to summarize his opening comments. Thank you.
Chairman Green, Congressman Garbarino, Congressman Smallwell, and members of the subcommittee. It is a privilege to testify before this committee at a critical moment for our nation and the free world. I hope that my statement for the record is useful to you and the important work that this committee is undertaking to understand U.S. cybersecurity posture and develop solutions to improve critical infrastructure, resilience, foster technological innovation, and harmonize regulations. It's a particular privilege to be on this panel alongside 3 private sector innovators and great Americans who have done vital work to help maintain our competitive advantage in cyberspace. This hearing is timely because, as has already been mentioned, in recent years, responses to adversary state attacks have been slow and inadequate. Strengthening deterrence will require the rapid imposition of costs on cyber attackers that go far beyond those that those attackers anticipate prior to acting against us. We must also improve the resilience of our systems through a combination of defensive and, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, offensive capabilities, as well as the capacity for rapid recovery. We must maintain competitive advantage in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and other technologies relevant to cybersecurity and the associated protection of critical infrastructure. Chairman Green, as you already mentioned, particularly important are going to be removing barriers to implementation of cyberspace solutions and AI models. And I think that's a particularly important aspect of getting from information to action, as you mentioned. And we must improve dramatically the security of our critical technologies and research enterprises from the threat of relentless state-based espionage. Accomplishing these tasks will require close cooperation between the public and private sectors and academia and with international partners, as well as investments in research and, I would say, especially human capital. Maintaining our advantage in human capital should include attracting the best talent to our universities and granting visas to graduates who can help grow our nation's talent base in science and engineering. Thank you. It's a real privilege to be with you.
Thank you, General McMaster, and I now recognize Ms. Whitmore for 5 minutes to summarize her opening statement.
Chairman Green, Congressman Garbarino, and Congressman Swalwell, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on innovation in cybersecurity, including how our adversaries are intensifying their attacks, and more importantly, how we can innovate to turbocharge our defenses. My name is Wendy Whitmore, and I'm the Chief Security Intelligence Officer at Palo Alto Networks. Palo Alto Networks is an American cybersecurity company founded in 2005 that has since become a global cybersecurity leader. We support 97 of the Fortune 100, the U.S. federal government, critical infrastructure operators, and a wide range of state and local partners. The breadth and depth of the organizations that we help protect gives us a unique vantage point into the cyber threat landscape, and what we see is very concerning. As recent campaigns like SALT and Volt Typhoon have reinforced, our cyber adversaries, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and others, are more active and aggressive than ever. They are leveraging AI to increase the speed and scale of their attacks, to enhance tactics like phishing, exfiltrate data faster, and execute complex multi-stage attacks that are increasingly disruptive to the American public. Consider this. Every single day, Palo Alto Networks blocks up to 31 billion cyber attacks. Up to 9 million of those daily attacks represent novel attack methods never previously seen. To stay a step ahead, relentless innovation must be central to our cyber defenses. Innovation with AI at its core has the potential to disrupt the legacy status quo of chasing each new threat with an isolated, disjointed solution. Instead, we can leverage AI to analyze security data in real time and then automate our responses. This evolved approach can simultaneously, 1, deliver transformative cybersecurity outcomes, 2, drive much needed cost rationalization, and 3, eliminate inefficient manual processes. Palo Alto Networks supports this committee's desire to pivot away from a stale, point-in-time, compliance-first mindset for cyber resilience and radically rethink how AI and automation can modernize our cyber defenses. The potential impact here is not hypothetical. We've seen our customers dramatically improve their cyber defenses. With AI-powered security operations centers, their average response times to cyber attacks have dropped from 2 or 3 days to under 2 hours. This is a transformative shift. Palo Alto Networks is proud to be an integrated national security partner with the federal government. My written testimony includes a series of recommendations policymakers should consider at this pivotal moment for our nation's cyber defense. Let me take a moment to focus on a few of those. First, focus on measurable cybersecurity outcomes. Ensure cybersecurity investments improve agencies' basic cyber vital signs by reducing the mean time to detect and the mean time to respond to security incidents. Second, forcefully respond to SALT Typhoon by implementing zero trust. This evolved security approach does not implicitly grant access, and it can limit the impact of these attacks. Third, fully embrace AI to support cyber defense. Network defenders are drowning in data as they manually triage alerts. AI has the power to modernize cyber security operations centers and allow analysts to be more proactive in their threat hunting. And fourth, promote secure AI by design. To safely harness the incredible power of AI, enterprises must have the frameworks and capabilities to discover, assess, and protect against threats to AI infrastructure. At the end of the day, people, processes, and technology must work in concert. Palo Alto Networks applaud Chairman Green's reintroduction of the Cyber Pivot Act to help foster a steady pipeline of trained cyber professionals and begin addressing our nation's cybersecurity workforce gap. We continue to see productive collaboration take place across a range of cybersecurity-focused convening bodies, including CISA's Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. We support Representative Swalwell's efforts to put wind in the sails of JCDC's mission. Critical to sustaining an enduring partnership is the free exchange of cyber threat intelligence across the public and private sector. To that end, we support swift reauthorization of the Cyber Information Sharing Act of 2015 and appreciate the thoughtful hearing Representative Garbarino convened on this issue earlier this month. Palo Alto Networks takes our partnership with law enforcement and lawmakers and this committee seriously. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Whitmore. I now recognize Ms. Manfra for 5 minutes to summarize her opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Green and Garbarino, Ranking Member Swalwell. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and for your focus on this important issue. As was said, my name is Jeanette Manfra, and I'm the head of Global Risk and Compliance for Google Cloud. We appreciate you holding this important hearing, and we do look forward to sharing Google's perspective on opportunities for regulatory harmonization and compliance modernization to better enable our entire ecosystem to protect itself against the rising threats. Technology advances, as do the threats, and cybersecurity defenders must adapt to it all if we want their approaches to stay current. In an interconnected world facing growing cyber attacks, it is critical to ensure that technology systems are resilient and keep people safe. For nearly 20 years, Google has pioneered both secure by design and zero trust architectures, which means that we embed security into every approach of our software development lifecycle, including looking at physical security throughout our entire stack. At Google Cloud, we believe in something we call shared fate, which moves beyond shared responsibility and indicates less of a transactional relationship in the security responsibilities, but it shows that we are investing in our own security, in our infrastructure, in our platforms, in our software, but we are also investing in ensuring that our customers can be secure and compliant and modernize their own systems. Regulating cybersecurity at the national scale, though, is complex, poses unique challenges, and carries high stakes. Regulatory and compliance regimes impact the resilience of critical infrastructure, economic development, the pace of technological innovation, military deployments and capabilities, and the daily lives of American citizens. As a result, cybersecurity regulation should be carefully balanced, promoting strong cybersecurity baseline standards while allowing flexibility to account for evolving technology and the ever-changing threat landscape. At Google, we recommend a regulatory approach that is agile and focuses on aligning baseline requirements across sectors. The approach must also allow for additional sector-specific requirements that are complementary to and not duplicative of or in conflict with those standard baselines. This approach would increase adoption of security principles across the federal government, critical infrastructure, and the wider private sector. Regulatory agility will help reduce compliance burdens, enhance coordination, build public trust, and allow for a more resilient approach as the threats change, new economic sectors emerge, and agency responsibilities change and shift over time. I believe regulations must prioritize tangible outcomes over mere checklists. Google's commitment to openness, interoperability, transparency, responsibility, a secure by design approach, intelligent security systems, and collaborative efforts can only be fully realized within such an adaptable regulatory environment. We urge Congress to modernize cybersecurity regulations and create a stable baseline that existing sectors can adhere to and future sectors can adopt as a reliable guide for improving security and resilience. To achieve regulatory harmonization, we'll offer just a few central recommendations. First, leveraging well-established standards and processes for any contemplated security baseline approach. In our views, initiatives like the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, or FedRAMP, is well established and we're very supportive of GSA's efforts to modernize this, including through initiatives like FedRAMP 20X that looks at increased automation. And we further encourage leveraging capabilities like the Open Security Controls Assessment Language, or OSCAL, for more streamlined authorizations. Second, any harmonized standards should implement a risk-based approach, ensuring compliance options are aligned to specific risk levels or categories to maximize flexibility and efficiency commensurate with the level of risk associated with a particular technology, application, or use case. And finally, complement harmonization through a clear approach to reciprocity for different certification regimes. As the committee considers mechanisms to achieve regulatory harmonization, we also urge the members to continue to foster public-private dialogue on the topic and to look at a global harmonized approach to ensure enterprise and service providers can focus on security outcomes as a top priority. We remain committed to the security of the digital ecosystem, and we're pleased to continue to engage with you on future cybersecurity regulations.
Thank you, Ms. Manfra. I now recognize Mr. Cable for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman Green, Chairman Garbarino, and Ranking Member Swalwell, thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. My name is Jack Cable. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Corridor, a company using AI to make secure by design a reality. Our platform understands the security model of a code base, refactors unsafe code, and adds guardrails around AI coding assistance. This hearing is a deeply personal topic for me. We're here at Stanford, my alma mater, where I study computer science, Throughout my career as a self-taught ethical hacker, working in the private sector, academia, and government, I've prided myself on finding innovative solutions to the hardest problems in cybersecurity. Most recently, I helped lead CISA's work on Secure by Design and open source security and created the Secure by Design Pledge. As this committee has highlighted, state-sponsored hackers from the People's Republic of China are burrowed within our critical infrastructure. Should China invade Taiwan, they stand to conduct destructive cyber attacks on our power grids, water systems, telecom providers, and more. But these attacks are not inevitable. Most cyber attacks exploit preventable vulnerabilities in software products or insecure default configurations. This could be as simple as a default password that sits unchanged. Rather than placing the burden on end users like small businesses or school systems, software manufacturers must build secure by design products, thus raising costs on our adversaries. This is our best hope to defend against PRC cyber threats, and the time to act is now. Today, I'll focus on 3 areas for urgent action: securely adopting AI, secure by design, and strengthening security research. First, AI. A revolution is underway in software development. It's now possible to build a website with just a single prompt. The vast majority of developers now use AI coding assistants, enabling them to ship software faster than ever before. This will unlock tremendous innovation and advancements in productivity. At the same time, these tools can introduce vulnerabilities. Studies show that even top AI models write vulnerable code 30 to 40% of the time. It's only a matter of time until AI coding assistants introduce a severe vulnerability in critical software that is exploited. At Corridor, we're helping companies embrace AI securely. Our platform adds guardrails to AI assistants, preventing them from introducing vulnerabilities in the first place. As AI adoption accelerates, these kinds of protections must become the norm, and I encourage Congress to foster R&D to enable rapid software development without compromising on security. Second, secure by design. At CISA, we were often asked if secure by design would stifle innovation. As someone building my own company, I can say with confidence that the opposite is true. The same design decisions that make systems secure by default also produce higher quality code that costs less to maintain. The over 300 companies who voluntarily committed to CISA's pledge is another sign that security and innovation can go hand in hand. Buyers can also shift market incentives. Last month, JP Morgan Chase published a letter urging their vendors to prioritize security, noting that poor security practices are actively enabling cyber attacks. At CISA, we called this secure by demand. The US government should lead by reforming procurement. Today's check-the-box compliance-oriented processes focus more on enterprise security than the actual security of products. It's like checking that a factory has locked its doors without testing the quality of the products that it produces. CISA's Secure Software Development Self-Attestation Form is a good start. Congress and the administration should build on this by incorporating more outcomes-based product security measures in procurement, drawing from CISA's pledge and the product security bad practices list. Third, security research. The PRC has enacted laws requiring security researchers to report vulnerabilities to the Chinese government before disclosing to vendors. I recently published a piece with Jen Easterly advocating for Congress to respond by strengthening the open and transparent security research ecosystem in the United States, recognizing that security researchers like myself can play a vital role in discovering and reporting vulnerabilities before our adversaries can. While we've made progress, laws like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, or CFAA, continue to chill security research. Congress should reform the CFAA and associated laws to exempt good faith security research, building on DOJ's work to discourage legal action against ethical hackers. Additionally, the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, or CVE program, is an essential resource for tracking vulnerabilities and their root causes. This program must continue, and all companies should issue complete, accurate, and timely CVE records. Congress should codify under CISA the CVE program's essential mission as a national record of security flaws. In closing, I would be remiss not to recognize the exodus of technical talent that has occurred at CISA over the last several months. I've personally seen how CISA has lost its very best. In the face of increasing threats, we can't undermine the capacity of America's Cyber Defense Agency and its ability to attract and retain the best technical talent. This only makes us less secure as a nation. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your testimony, all of you. And I now recognize my friend and the host here of this district, or the congressman from this district, Mr. Swalwell, for 5 minutes. Ranking member, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, for coming to the Bay Area. Yeah, my district is just right across the bridge. Sam Liccardo now represents this district, but the chairman has a deep interest in this area geographically, but also this area is an issue. And so thank you, Chairman. We've had a good visit. And I also want to thank my friend, Mr. Garbarino. We are the quietest subcommittee in the Homeland Security Committee room. There's a lot of news that's made in that room. But when Mr. Garbarino and I have our hearings, it's usually a snooze fest for anyone who wants drama, because we're trying to get things done. And the Chairman Green has enabled us to do that. Thank you to our witnesses for participating. General, thank you to you for your service to our country, and thank you to Stanford for hosting this. My interest in this area, I represent Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and Sandia National Laboratory, and they work in this space. And then in the private sector, we have many, not only startups, but giants in this space. And so I'm in the solutions business, and I know the two gentlemen up here are as well. And my priority is this Congress, and I want to hear from these witnesses as I juggle this hearing and a meeting 2 floors upstairs. My priority is to really leverage the private sector, make sure that the federal government is as additive as possible, and as you pointed out, Ms. Whitmer, to reform the JCDC if we can, to make it more responsive, have more structure and scaffolding as far as criteria, and make sure it's a two-way information sharing network, not just the private sector sharing with the federal government. So in the spirit of getting to these questions and hearing from the witnesses, I'll submit my remarks to the record, Mr. Chair, and I'll yield back.
Thanks. I think the only bipartisan legislation, or all the bipartisan legislation I've done this Congress and last Congress was with you, Eric, so thank you. I want to thank our witnesses for their insightful testimony, and the members that are going to be asking a lot of questions. And I'll start with those questions myself, and then we'll honestly, we got plenty of time, so I'm going to take as long as I want to, okay?
As long as you don't mind if I interrupt.
Honestly, the witnesses generated a lot more. I'm taking furious notes. One of the things that shocks me is how uninformed the American people seem to be on just how pervasive the attacks against this nation are in cyberspace. The Assault and Volt Typhoon being an example. I think I was speaking at CrowdStrike or some place. It was in DC when I said this, when I first coined this phrase. But having that intrusion into our cell phone systems, our telecoms. Imagine if Russia placed a satchel charge next to a cell tower and had a detonator in their hand. We'd be livid. But essentially, that's exactly what China has done to our telecommunications systems, right, Mr. Cable? You brought it up very well in your testimony. And yet, there's no clamor about this on the television. There's no, alerts or reels. They literally have a kill switch in the system right now. And nobody's making a big deal out of it. Why do you guys think that's the case? And I'll throw that out to any one of you who wants to answer.
I'll just say, first of all, I think because we haven't really taken this to the American people to explain the gravity of it. And I think to really ask the question, okay, well, why? Why is China on our systems? And Mr. Cable really, I think, alluded to it, is because I think they're preparing for war. Yeah. The Chinese Communist Party is preparing for war in a number of ways, right? We see it with their massive buildup of their military forces, about a 44-fold increase in their defense spending since the year 2000. We see it in the development of weapon systems to sort of keep us at bay. But also, I think what we can do is connect what we've seen with Volt Typhoon to a broader range of threats, including the massive buildup of their nuclear forces, about a 400% increase. I know it may seem extreme to say this, but I believe that China is developing a first strike nuclear capability against us. Because why else would you want to cripple all of your critical infrastructure, including communications infrastructure? And if you look at the pattern of their intelligence collection, for example, the balloon intelligence collection was really aimed at communications intelligence that can only be picked up at that altitude, and that was the communications intelligence associated with our strategic forces. So I think the American people haven't really had this explained in context, and maybe we need something like, the old movie The Day After, that shows what it would look like. Something like what was done with the Social Dilemma movie, to kind of bring it home to people. But that's something, Chairman Green, I think we can take on here at the Hoover Institution, is to sort of package, an understanding of this threat and communicate that as effectively as we can.
Yeah, I think that's something that's part of the reason why we're here. Not only to get the information from you guys, but to be on TV, so the American people can hear from you guys. Deterrence, I've always thought of deterrence as the product, not the sum of capability and will. You have all the capability in the world and zero will, you get zero deterrence. 0 times infinity is still 0. So if you guys could make some comments about what you think we need to do better in terms of capability and then in terms of will. I know that's a broad topic, but I'm thinking about really how do we establish deterrence in the cyberspace? And maybe Ms. Whitmore, you can take a shot at that.
Absolutely. And Chairman Green, I think further to your earlier question, as well as the General's commentary here, my viewpoint on this has been from 20 years of responding on the ground to some of the most major breaches that have occurred in the last 2 decades. And, many of those when I started my career in the military were highly classified investigations that no one talked about and certainly couldn't be talked about in open dialogue. And so that certainly contributed to the lack of awareness from the public. I think it is a great movement in the right direction that we now can have such an open dialogue. But the reality is, in addition to the lack of awareness, I think one of the things that we unfortunately do today is punish the victims. So what I mean by that is when we, for example, a bank robbery, we oftentimes don't publish that on the news and blame the bank for, having an armed robber come in at gunpoint and a teller provide them some funds that are in their tray. But when the media gets hold of cases of cybercrime and these massive intrusions, we do often do that. And then we add regulation in that requires them to provide information in this most dynamic time period, the first 48 to 72 hours, very similar to traditional crimes. That's also the time that it's most dynamic in a computer intrusion. So you have a victim who is now potentially trying to negotiate or have communications with an attacker. They're working with law enforcement, they're working with outside legal counsel, and they still don't have all the technical details of an investigation that are needed to fully answer these questions and understand, is this a national security issue? Is this potentially a cyber criminal that's could potentially be related to a terrorist or criminal organization? So I think that as we're talking through solutions here, there are a lot of technical recommendations, which certainly Palo Alto Networks would provide, about greater capabilities in the hands of the victims so that they can get answers quickly. But there's also the component of it of what can we do from a government lens of making sure that we're providing as much support possible to the victims so that we don't expect a small to medium business to effectively, to use your terminology, go up against some of the greatest military capability that our foreign adversaries have to offer.
Yeah, I'm going to go from the 100,000 foot down to, like, Mr. Cable, you talked about secure by design. This is more at the tactical level. And your company, if I understand it correctly, is out there trying to help other developers develop their products secure from the beginning. The whole point of the reversing of the economic model. one of the questions I ask is, I'm a physician. I ran a healthcare company. If I developed a medical device that looked really great, we put it in 200,000 people, and then it turns out to be faulty, and it harms those individuals, I'm done. I've lost everything, and my company's going to pay a big price, probably go out of business. Why is it that a software company that can put an app out there that has a vulnerability in it, no big deal? How is that fair? Can you explain something?
Thank you, Chairman, for the question. To your point, that this isn't fair, and to build on what Ms. Whitmore was saying, this is not a fair fight. If we look to the small businesses, the hospitals, the school systems who have been facing these attacks, whether they're ransomware attacks, whether they're state-sponsored actors, this is not a fair fight. We cannot rely on these under-resourced organizations to be able to defend against sophisticated cyber criminals and nation-state threats. Really, we need to your point, take a step back and look at the security of the technology that is underpinning our critical infrastructure. The fact is that today, in many ways, we are leaving our doors open to our nation's adversaries. They are able to compromise our critical infrastructure through relatively simple, preventable vulnerabilities in software products, and the software companies are not incentivized or held responsible for these vulnerabilities. At CISA, we worked to advocate for software companies to both voluntarily increase their security through the Secure by Design pledge, with both Google and Palo Alto Networks, for instance, are signatories of. We worked to make sure that companies were really pushing to the cutting edge and taking actions like reducing entire classes of vulnerabilities from their products. I am generally optimistic that we can root out these vulnerabilities from our software products, but this is going to take time, and it's really going to take shifting incentives. So there's, I think, good room to be had for discussions around what I mentioned with secure by demand, getting private companies, getting the government to start to demand better security practices from software suppliers. But I do also think we need to consider a software liability regime by which manufacturers of software products are held accountable for preventable vulnerabilities in those products. And of course, that we give sufficient safe harbor protections to ensure that there's a bar that software manufacturers can meet.
Well, I appreciate your answer on that, because it's a tough one. I talked to some of the biggest companies in the world that makes both software, operating systems, the whole gamut, and nobody wants to they don't want product liability, So, being a military, I'm going to ask one more question, then I'll turn it over to you, Governor. Being a military guy, I think courses of action, right? And then 3 military folks and a guy who worked in the government, so you probably have heard that term before. Courses of action. What are the courses of action? So you look at a ransomware attack, for example. If we're going to come up with solutions to how do we stop this stuff, we have to have courses of action. On the extreme, one I've heard, which on the surface sounds sort of anti-Republican, anti-private sector, but on some level makes some sense to me, is just outlaw the payment of a ransomware. A couple people get hit at the beginning. There's some cost of those entities because their systems are. Maybe we have a fund that can help cover that. But at some point, the bad guys aren't going to get paid. They know they're not going to get paid, and that would be ultimate deterrence for ransomware. What are your thoughts, Ms. Manfra?
I do not think it would be effective to outlaw the payment, but I wanted to go to your point on deterrence.
Let me make sure I got this. Not to outlaw ransomware.
Payments. You can outlaw ransomware.
I'm saying outlaw payments of ransomware. Because you can outlaw drugs, and they're everywhere, right? It's ubiquitous. But I mean to outlaw the payment.
The payments. Yeah. We should look at and discuss it some more, for sure. But I think it's just such a complicated space right now, and you run into scenarios where you potentially have life and safety issues without that payment. So there's lots of things that you would want to take into consideration.
Sure.
It's it's worth continuing that conversation, though. On the higher level, when you talk about deterrence, and it's something that I've thought about a lot, and we've thought about as a company too, is I think that there's a couple of different elements of thinking about deterrence, and oftentimes they get conflated when we're talking about cybersecurity. And when you're thinking about, and people say deterrence by denial, right? Make our defense excellent so they can't get through. And that is a real thing that we need to continue to invest in. But then you also talked about capability and will for not just that deterrence by denial, denying their ability to get into systems, but denying an ability to take the actions that they are seeking to. But I would say there's also thinking about and much more clear-eyed the risks that our country faces. So we need that stable baseline. We need to raise the level of security all over. Attackers are still taking advantage of very easily known vulnerabilities that should be fixed. And I agree that both software vendors and others in the community, there needs to be some accountability mechanisms in place to ensure that we're delivering secure and safe software. And then of course accountability in place to make sure that people are using it correctly. And so I would say there's one effort that needs to be focused on how do we stop the continued poor performance in known security issues. But then there's another effort, which the JCDC played some part in this, and I think can continue to, and CISA can continue to lean in here, is there are unique national risks that impact certain sectors more than others, and require a different set of capabilities and perhaps a smaller set of actors that have capabilities in the private sector and the government coming together to identify what is the threat, how are we going to counter that threat, who has the capabilities to do that in a collective way. And that requires a new type of public-private partnership that is just as important as raising that baseline and making sure every small business has what they need. But we also need to be focused very much on reducing the consequences of the next time we find China or some other actor in these critical systems. And we need to be opening up that dialogue and that operational collaboration between the companies and the entities in the government to do much more work in reducing those national risks for those foreign actors who would hold our country at risk.
Yeah, I'm going to make a quick comment, and then I'm going to let Mr. Garbarino have a couple of minutes. You said something there that was very interesting to me. Next time we find China in the system, so to speak, and this is something that's been my staff will tell you they've been hearing me say this for years. It is unfair for the federal government to expect the private sector to defend itself against a nation state. We, particularly my side of the aisle, has pushed very hard about a sovereign border, having a sovereign border that needs to be protected and that the government has a responsibility to protect. And if China were physically driving tanks across the southern border, that's exactly what the federal government would do, would be to defend against that. But I would submit that there is a cyber border that's just as sovereign, and we can't expect companies to defend themselves. And I think it's going to take a paradigm shift, because for decades we've taken this free market approach that private sector takes care of itself, government takes care of itself. And again, I think that's self-defeating, because the networks are so connected now. Wherever a person enters, they can pretty much move laterally anywhere in the networks. The government shares cloud space with companies at Amazon. So I just want to say that I couldn't agree with you more. I think, and I want to reiterate this to whomever's paying attention, the federal government has a responsibility, and we need to step up and partner and do it more and better. Ms. Garbarino, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as I wanted to jump in a couple of times, because I was writing down questions too based on some of their answers. If you hear something they say, you please jump in. Like I said, we have time, and I'm sure Mr. Swalwell will come down. He's always got great questions too when we have committee. But your first thing you brought up about why don't people care more, and I think it's because we haven't really felt pain in the country. There are no cyber attack. People who've gotten individual hacks have felt it. Companies who've gotten ransomware, they felt it. But I went to Estonia. You approved a trip for us to go, a cyber trip to Estonia 2 years ago, and they had the major cyber attacks, I think, back in 2007. Yeah, and they all take cybersecurity very seriously there. And we haven't had that yet, but for a few. And again, we missed. There were gas lines on the East Coast for a couple days. I mean, we haven't felt real pain. So I think that's a problem. I really appreciate what we're doing here and the witnesses they're doing here, because we're trying to be preemptive or proactive here and trying to fix something before we actually feel real pain. So I do appreciate you all being here. And Mr. Cable, I want to go back to something you said and talking about holding designers accountable. How would you, because I love the idea of secure by design. I love the work that CISA did. I love the work that all the companies that took that pledge. I think that's great. I think there should be a reliance when somebody buys something that there is at least some security, especially when you're talking about whether it's a phone or a computer program or a computer, whatever. There should be some reliance that there is some security there. And that they can depend on that without having to pay extra. But then you also have to go back and you have to weigh that against user error. Somebody clicks on something they're not supposed to click on. That's only as strong as your weakest link. So you can hold a company accountable for its design and up to a point, I believe. But at some point, the balance tips and goes to, well. Yeah, but people are also automatically think, okay, this is secure. I can just do whatever I want. I still don't have to be. I get to act. I mean, there still has to be some reliance on the individual. So how do we weigh that? And who holds the companies accountable if we hold them accountable? And how do you hold them accountable? Is it financial? What is it? And I'd love to hear from everybody on this, actually.
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. I agree that there is a balance to be struck, and this is an area that we focused on through the Secure by Design work at CISA. One aspect of secure by design we call it secure by default, this idea that the configuration out of the box of a software product should be a secure one. Just like when you buy a car and it comes with seatbelts, airbags, by default, you don't have to pay extra for those. We should also expect that security features are really built into software products. In my opening statement, I mentioned the example of a default password, where there are still products on the market that come out with a default password, and the expectation is that the end user of that product goes and changes the password. I'm sure we've all been there. We know that that doesn't always happen. And the question that we asked at CISA is, why does that responsibility have to be on the end user? Why doesn't the manufacturer of the product, as many do, ship the product with, say, a random password so that it is more secure by default? So that's really what we're talking about when we mean secure by default. And I agree that there's an extent where users can go and change configurations, and at some point it does go out of the manufacturer's control. But often what we're talking about aren't complicated scenarios. It's where a user takes the product out of the box, deploys it, and it's susceptible to some vulnerability that is enabled by default. So really when it comes to shifting incentives, to what I was saying earlier, I think it is essential to consider how we can help take this burden off of end users, off of small businesses, hospitals, and others who really don't have the capacity, nor should they, to defend against these attacks, and see how software manufacturers can assume more of this responsibility. That was a focus with the Secure by Design pledge, where companies, now over 300 companies who committed to taking action in areas like reducing default passwords across their products, increasing the use of multi-factor authentication, such as by enabling that by default, which we know can prevent cyber attacks, and reducing common classes of vulnerabilities. So I think there's lots of areas and potential really for software manufacturers to innovate on the basis of security, to compete based on that. And I encourage this committee to think about how it can help to shape some of those market incentives.
But what's the incentive? I mean, is it the government pushing, say, okay, these have met the Secure by Design standard, So what are we saying? Like, okay, in order for a financial institution to take part in the FDIC protection, you have to have this. I mean, what's the incentive? I mean, is it carrot? Is it stick? I mean, what are we doing to make sure that these things fall? And please, everybody, jump in.
Yeah, well, one thing that I would note is I think today when we look at the cybersecurity regulations and requirements, those are almost always placed on the end users of technology products. It's requirements on financial companies or hospitals or others who really kind of, I think, to the point of this discussion, aren't the most resourced or the most capable of applying those. And really where I think we need to go is to look at, okay, how can we help shift some of those requirements off of those least responsible, off of those who really are no fit to go up against a nation state, and help to rebalance the responsibilities so that they are placed on the software manufacturers who are most capable and the best position to bear that. So I think that could be done through the federal purchasing power, through private sector purchasing power, through a software liability regime, really with the end goal of not moving to an unreasonable standard, but at least having some baseline by which we can make sure the software products we rely on throughout our critical infrastructure are more secure by design.
Ms. Amper.
Sure, and if I could, I agree, and if I could add that the clarity of the standard and the requirement for transparency too, right? Security is very hard for users, customers, and so I do think there's incentives in the software industry to make security easier, naturally, but we need to increase the demand for that, and the federal government has an opportunity through their purchasing power to do that through standards, whether that's through certification regimes or others, but then also mandating transparency. And so, at Google, we've been pushing things like SALSA, we call it SALSA, but where you have artifacts that say this is how, the code was tested, so you can see the provenance of the code and you can have a higher level of assurance of the integrity of that. Making sure that there's, every time you buy a microwave, right, that it's gone through testing and you understand, and you may not know every single detail of what that testing was, but that it's received a certification and it's been allowed to be sold to you. And so there's more work that could be done there for sure in establishing what those baseline standards are. And the federal government has a real opportunity to drive that, what those standards are, driving more certifications around it. But then I would just say there needs to be much more transparency, and it needs to be just easier for a procurement official, for that end user to be able to understand what they're buying, and that it's clear how it's meeting their security requirements. So the government also has an obligation to set, I would say, clearer security standards that are more consistent across the government. Those are all opportunities, I think, that all companies would welcome that participation with the government on.
Any other addition?
Just a quick comment, because this goes to Chairman Green's comment earlier about how so much of our attack surface is in the .com and in the public sector rather than in the government sector. I think there should be a convergence of standards between .gov and .com. All companies should strive for that. I think there are also some best practices that should be followed, that everybody should share with one another as we create this community of really companies or anybody who touches critical infrastructure with their products. And that's kind of a holistic approach to security involving, we're talking a lot about IT, but it's OT, it's hardware, it's supply chain. And then it won't be until we're all together on these standards that you can really reduce what is really critical, which is that third-party risk, which we've seen really go through the roof in recent years in terms of software and supply chains that can have a devastating effect if they're compromised. And I think that what's really key, and I think what we're talking about, I'd love to hear the fellow panelists' thoughts about this. There is a tension between setting a standard and holding companies accountable for it, and not treating the company like a victim, because you want them to report. And really what you want is the government and that company to be working together when something bad happens. And overall, companies, I think, have to kind of adopt the attitude of try to envision, like what we do in the military. What's the worst thing that could happen to you, right? And then take action to prevent that, right? What you would do the day after a massive attack is what you should do right now, And so I think how to think about these complex challenges, and then melding together of .gov and .com standards and this holistic approach to security, which I would say, and I mentioned in the statement for the record, includes not just threats in cyberspace, but insider threats as well. Because the CCP, you close the front door, they're coming through the window. If you put bars on the window, they're putting a ladder to the second floor. You close that down, they're tunneling into your basement, and they will do it in the physical world through espionage as well as in cyberspace.
I certainly agree with so much of the commentary that my fellow witnesses have shared. And Palo Alto Networks is strong supporter and signatory of Secure by Design as well. And I think something that has been resonating here is just how challenging it is to maintain visibility into the attack surface as it continues to expand. So we're looking at supply chain vulnerabilities, right? Really figuring out how do we manage every single software provider that anyone in the organization may have procured software through. That's very challenging. I think we need to continue and further the discussion to secure AI by design, because we are very concerned that as we move forward to more organizations just really ubiquitously deploying AI, that we are going to have an even larger expanded attack surface and more of these challenges.
So that's mind, Chairman? No. That's my follow-up question. Because we talked about AI secure by design. I've heard it multiple times now. Specifically, when it comes to legislation, we're looking at how to regulate. And you just talked about a study that said 40% of code written by AI is coming up with vulnerabilities or could have vulnerabilities. When government takes action doing, zoning, they look at a environmental study. They look at the effects they look at the effects of what the project will do. We're looking at regulating AI, and it's now been brought up to me twice in the last week how nobody's doing a cybersecurity review of what Congress is contemplating when we're talking about regulating AI. And that sounds like that's what you're all talking about here. Nobody's looking at whether the AI product is going to have data protections or cybersecurity built into it. So I'd love to hear more of your thoughts about how everything we have now it's out there. We're, secure by design. You got to go back and fix it. AI is still being developed. So what do we do? Ms. Manfra?
Can I just defer to my panelists on that? Because washed up generals shouldn't be talking about all this technology. But I will say quickly, though, there's going to be a tension between rapid model adoption and whatever kind of security protocol we put into place. We have the best AI models from what I learned from people who know this business, but the friction and the difficulty is in adopting those models. And what the CCP's advantage is that they can adopt those models much more quickly than we can. So I would just say whatever we do, maybe think in terms of incentivizing the kind of security, but not delaying the adoption of these models.
Thank you, Senator.
That's really well said, and maybe I'll kick us off here, is on the one hand, we have to recognize that there's competition, and we want American companies and American economic leadership in AI. And so we have to ensure that that is continued to be incentivized. And at the same time, AI has a lot of potential for improving our cybersecurity capabilities. There's a tremendous amount of noise that cybersecurity defenders have to deal with. I think you talked about this a lot. And so using AI to be able to help them sift that signal out of the noise. We have security operators that spend lots of time doing things that could be automated instead of, taking that to the next level of critical thinking of what could be done. So there's a lot of opportunity with AI to improve security. What I would just offer is, so at Google, we've put out what we call Secure AI Framework, which was based off of our own internal work in both leveraging AI for ourselves, but also understanding and learning a lot of lessons about securing AI. So we've put that out, and we're working and built a coalition with a lot of other companies for the use of secure AI in open sourcing solutions to help organizations protect protect against some unique areas of AI that sometimes cross over also into safe use of AI. Recognize that. A lot of AI security is still the same security. You still need to do the same things that we need to do in general, but there are some novel things for AI. So I'd offer that the work that the coalition is doing and some of the standards that attempting to drive through OASIS and other foundations might be a good place to start if you're thinking about what those standards should look like for AI.
I would first like to start by really echoing Ms. Manfred's comments that AI is enabling tremendous innovation. We're here at Stanford. This hearing is on innovation. We're here in Silicon Valley. I live in San Francisco and see every day how AI, let's focus, for instance, in the role of writing software, is vastly changing how that looks. I think we can reasonably expect, if not today, that within 1 or 2 years, AI will be writing the vast majority of code that is in use. We can see how AI can accelerate building software for cybersecurity products. We're doing some of that ourselves, but also for scientific discoveries and many other fields. And I think this unlocks a lot of new exciting possibilities. But to the discussion here, we do have to recognize that much like humans writing code can introduce vulnerabilities, so can AI. And I think we have a really great opportunity to get in at the start, at the point when these models are being trained, at the point where these tools are just starting to take off and build safeguards in place. So I think, for instance, we're focusing particularly on the case of helping secure as companies are adopting AI for writing code and enabling them to write code 5, 10, many times faster, to have some guardrails in place. To Ms. Manfred's point, both in terms of the security of AI systems, but also the vulnerabilities that AI can introduce. The vast majority of the time, this isn't going to be anything new. It's going to be the same classes of vulnerabilities that we've known about for decades, we've been struggling with for decades, and yet we've known how to prevent them at scale. So I think this gives us a really great opportunity to begin to put some of the actions that, for instance, Google, other companies have really pioneered to root out entire classes of vulnerabilities and make sure that AI is designing software that is secure by design and is more resilient to these attacks from our adversaries.
Go back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Swalwell for his time in questioning, and we're not really keeping a clock, Eric, so take all the time you need.
Well, Mr. Cable, you mentioned that we are obviously at Stanford, your alma mater, and General, I think you're affiliated now with this great institution. Could you speak to the role that the federal support for technology has had on cybersecurity innovation, particularly as it relates to academic research, and if anyone else wants to add to that?
Well, obviously, the research programs in our universities have been one of our greatest competitive advantages. Our ability to develop technologies, but then spin those technologies out so entrepreneurs can take those technologies and put them into action in terms of real capabilities that give us our greatest differential advantage. It's our innovation and then our ability to combine that innovation with our unbridled entrepreneurship. And so the universities enable our free market advantages. The other critical aspect of it is the development of human capital. And I think one of the most disappointing things that we've seen recently is the degree to which we've lost a lot of critical expertise within the government, expertise that was developed in institutions like this, that was serving with great distinction in the government. Mr. Cable mentioned this already. But then also where there is a tremendous opportunity here in the academy is to attract the best talent from within our country, certainly, but internationally as well. So the impediments we've seen to bringing in the best minds and then to provide them with the kind of education that can help give us a differential advantage. And then, of course, the other part of that is the visa process and immigration reform that would allow us to take advantage of. I think nobody's trying to immigrate to China, right? So this is one of our greatest competitive advantages. So I'm concerned. Of course, there are a lot of efficiencies to be gained, probably in academia and research. Maybe too much overhead. I think there's reform is necessary, but certainly we don't want to give up that differential advantage in human capital, technology, and innovation.
Yeah, thank you. Well said. Anyone else want to add to that? Well, I have a practical question as a parent to an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. When should our children start to be taught AI? And are you thinking about this as an industry as you prepare for the workforce? Because I think the general's right. We want to attract the best and brightest around the world, but I still want to look my constituents in the eyes and say, I'm doing everything to make sure that your own kid is going to have the best shot to compete for that job as well. So like when should we start to prepare our kids to use it?
I can start as the mother of a 13-year-old. I think, I believe the approach to technology and cybersecurity in general is early awareness. And of course, you have to moderate within your own sort of risk construct of the level of engagement that you allow the young children to have, but helping them understand how they keep their information private, how these systems work. So it's not just a black box for them is really important. And also allowing them to learn about AI and what AI can offer them, but understand. And I think children at a pretty young age can understand some of these complexities, but helping them see both the benefits and the cons, I think, is really important. So that's my personal experience. On the Google side, we invest a lot in educating and really trying to raise that next generation of computer scientists and security engineers, all the way from elementary school through college. And so I absolutely believe it's really important.
Yeah, I don't know if you're like me, but I get fact checked by Alexa like 4 times a day by my 8-year-old.
Yeah, I just have
he'll
to
ask me something and he'll compare Alexa's answer to
I tell him
my
that he
answer.
can do it as long as it's Gemini.
Yeah, right. Mr. Cable.
I would agree with that, and I would really add that at the core to a lot of this is this idea of digital literacy, and I think in addition to understanding AI, for instance, I think it is going to be more important than ever that children understand the basics of areas like computer science and can really begin to know how these systems work so that they're able to navigate them. I myself started coding when I was 11 and really had a journey teaching myself how to build websites and apps, and saw a lot of the potential in computer science. To Ms. Manford's point, I think there is also a critical area where we need to pay attention to our current and future software developers. One area that I'll note, and I saw this when I was an undergrad here at Stanford, is that across the top 20 universities in computer science today in America, not one of them requires students who are getting a computer science degree to take a security course or to learn about security. If we think about security being really core to the future of software development, as we've discussed in this hearing today, I think it's essential that current and future software developers know a thing or two about security, much like we would expect, say, civil engineers to understand how to ensure that bridges can be built securely. So I would encourage this committee to explore how we can really make sure that computer scientists are considered a core part of the software and cyber workforce, and to ensure that they have a baseline understanding of security.
And to all of the witnesses, what is your assessment of the current state of preparedness in the U.S. for quantum threats? And how can we expedite efforts to prepare for quantum computing, particularly as it would relate to decrypting our data? Yeah, start
I
with
don't
general.
know. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe just a general comment. China is attempting to surpass us in quantum technologies. You might say they've already done that in capacity, but not yet in capability. So obviously, it's very important for us to invest in it because we can use those same kind of capabilities to defeat de-encryption. And so, but I'll turn it over to the real experts here.
I will not pretend to be an expert in quantum computing, but what I can say is,
Well, I guess how is Google preparing for?
There is a need for people to take this more seriously. There's the post-quantum crypto world is going to be very real soon. If I recall correctly, the NIST NSA timelines to make sure that you've adopted post-quantum crypto is 2035, I believe. And I still think that is a good target. Google has been investing a ton in both post-quantum cryptography capabilities, but also quantum computing. We just released a paper a couple days ago about this. The thing, though, is people think, well, that's 10 years away. But it takes a while to implement these capabilities. And so I would just encourage organizations in this committee, as you're looking at this, it's not just something that's an organization can figure out in 6 months. And they need to be taking it seriously. They need to understand what their capabilities are. We've been working on it in implementing post-quantum crypto capabilities for a few years now, including in our internal communications. We do have some capabilities that we offer customers as well. But that I would say, hard to make a broad estimate on preparedness, but I would say generally, or we do need to take it more seriously as a community.
I'd echo Ms. Manfra's comments just in terms of Palo Alto Networks. Our approach has also been for years being concerned about what happens with post-quantum ability to decrypt information that today is protected. And so we've focused on that particularly with our network security products as well as our endpoint security products that today, are able to withstand what we believe to be, post-quantum attacks moving forward, and then also offer some options for our clients as well to help them implement those strategies. But you couldn't have said it better, I think, in terms of the 2035 deadline. I think is far, too distant in the future. I think we need, as a government in particular, to be attacking that as if it's more near term.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Whitmer, you had mentioned support for the JCDC bill that the chairman and I were able to pass together out of the committee last year. Can you speak also, Ms. Manfra, both of your companies are a part of JCDC. Can you just speak to any reforms that you would like to see, or what we could do to make it more agile and a better neighborhood watch-like program?
I think your earlier comments commented on the need for a very effective two-way street. And when we see information sharing of any kind, whether it's between public and private partners or smaller industry-led groups, the challenge is oftentimes there's organizations who provide a lot of information and then organizations who don't share as much. And the information in those type of settings is only as effective as it is incredibly actionable and contextualized and timely. And so I think the need to further encourage that effective sharing as, on a two-way street, and make sure that from the timeliness perspective, the types of data we're focusing on are going to drive the outcomes we're looking for.
Thank you.
I would agree. I would add that it's a real opportunity to focus on, we've been talking a lot about baseline standards and raising the baseline, but there's this other really important area of the sectors and that higher level threat. And so CISA, I think, has a real opportunity to deeply understand national risk and using the JCDC to bring those private sector and government entities together that have unique capabilities to reduce those risks. I think it's important to be very focused, right? And we talk a lot about information sharing, but information sharing for what purpose? And just generally reducing cyber risk is too broad. And so what specifically are we focused on? What specific threat are we working to reduce the risk of? Which sector are we focused on? There's a lot of companies participating that have a lot of amazing intelligence. And the government brings a lot of amazing intelligence. And so how do we focus that work more on disrupting those highest threats and reducing those most significant risks to the country? I think that's a really big area they could focus on.
Thank you. Chairman, I yield back.
So I know there are probably some other questions. You have a few, and Mr. Swalwell may generate one or two as we're continuing. I did want to say a couple of things and had a question. I'll let Mr. Garbarino ask one or two, and then if one pops up, we have some time. Y'all doing okay? Anybody need a break? All right. We talk about this economic model, and I mentioned it where we talked about the victim versus the villain, and there being a very low cost of entry for the villain and a very high cost. I think there's another economic model, and that is that first to market, which results in vulnerabilities. And I get the competitive advantage of first to market. I ran a healthcare company, and always wanted to beat my competitor market because it did give you a financial advantage. But I'm just making an observation here. This is something that we have to figure out, and I do think liability has to play a role in it. And here I am, an ER physician, suggesting that liability is a good thing. My lawyer buddies are all their jaws are on the floor, but no, I do believe that it is the path, or a path, certainly a course of action that we have to consider. One of the questions that kind of came to my mind as I'm listening to the witnesses, and we've got this incredible panel here, someone from academia now, but who spent a lot of time in the military. We've got two of our nation's greatest companies. I mean, really. We've got a startup, a guy who was in government and who's now starting up, a young entrepreneur who, so the question comes to mind about education and the talent pipeline. And my question is, we train cyber folks in the military. I think you helped, if I remember this correctly, start Army Futures Command and get all that going. So we educate cyber professionals. In the civilian sector, we educate cyber professionals. In the military, to get people excited about the military, we have these simulators that go around, and you got a young 12-year-old who hops in and flies an Apache helicopter. It's the coolest thing. Gets them excited at a very young age. What are some ideas on how we can do that for the cyberspace, and how can we collaborate on military education in cyber, our military guys and our academic centers, in preparing sort of this workforce of the future for cyber? And anybody, all of you, feel free to answer. So, one, recruiting, and two, how do we work together to collaborate to get to where we need to go?
I'm happy to kick this off, and thank you, Chairman, for the question. I would maybe start with, to your point that it's not just about the victims or the villains, but really that the vendors, the manufacturers of software products have a key role to play here. And I think we can extend that to the cyber workforce, recognizing that cybersecurity professionals alone aren't going to be able to solve the cybersecurity problems of today. And that's because we really need to work back to the point where software is developed. So where I was saying earlier that we need to ensure that every current and future software developer has a solid understanding of the security baseline, and knows, particularly as they're using more and more AI tools, writing less code themselves, and more so instructing AI assistants to write code, that they know how to identify vulnerabilities and to produce more secure software. But that's also an area where technology can help, and that we can leverage artificial intelligence, for instance, to help educate software developers to help flag security issues as they pop up, and make sure that ultimately we can really build products that are more secure by design. I've seen firsthand the impact that really real-world experience can have when it comes to getting into cybersecurity. When I was 15, found my first vulnerability in a bug bounty program, participated in many more, have reported vulnerabilities to companies like Google. And there's many companies out there today that embrace security researchers with open arms. The US government does as well. That's how I found my path into working in the US government after placing first in the Hack the Air Force competition. So I think we really need to build up more of these initiatives as well to get young people excited, to get young people participating. When I came to Stanford my freshman year, I helped create a bug bounty for Stanford, and then spent the following several years identifying vulnerabilities in Stanford systems. So the more we can do to really give young people hands-on experience and cool technical challenges, I think we can really motivate people to join the cyber workforce.
I hope they reduced your tuition for that.
It certainly helped.
Yeah, good.
I think that's so well said, and I would also just add that I think Google has proven that you don't have to sacrifice velocity for security. And so it's to what Mr. Cable was saying, a lot of this comes back to, do the software developers have the tools and the practices built that allows them to code in a secure way? Do you have, do you make security hard for your developers and your users, or do you innovate in tools and capabilities that make it a pleasure to develop on your system in addition to it being secure and reliable? And so I think we need to be looking at more of those instead of continuing in these sort of false choices that you have to either have velocity or security. And it does take a different mindset, and sometimes that might need to be imposed externally on organizations, but I absolutely think it's possible. On the other side, on the workforce, I think there's both developing a workforce of individuals who are going to be focused on cybersecurity, absolutely, and entice them into the government for as long as we can keep them there. Government's got so many interesting problems that people can't find outside in the private sector. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to do that and continue to invest there. But I would also say we shouldn't just focus on teaching cyber to cyber professionals. Lawyers need to understand it. Doctors need to understand it. Teachers need to understand it. And so building more interdisciplinary programs, organizations like Stanford and others throughout the country are doing this, but bringing people together so that a lawyer can understand the technical aspects of a situation in cybersecurity. An engineer can understand even potentially some of the legal aspects. So cybersecurity, I think, is a really important from an interdisciplinary perspective, and being able to bring these different disciplines together, whether that's an anthropologist. We've hired anthropologists who bring like an amazing viewpoint into this area, or making sure our engineers understand secure coding practices. I think there's lots of opportunities in that space as well.
You generated a thought, and I don't know, maybe this is what you were saying, and I just thought it was novel in my brain, but we have History 101 when you go to college.
Yes.
It's a required, most colleges are required, but there is a required basic curriculum to get an undergraduate degree at just about every university. Why not a Cyber 101?
Yeah.
As a part of the required curriculum at university, if you're going to school here, you're going to take Cyber 101.
I agree.
Yeah, I certainly second or third the commentary that's been said. I think it's critical that we continue to work with universities to shift the curriculum. Mr. Cable mentioned that, just as recently as when he had received a computer science degree, security classes weren't mandatory. I personally work with both Duke University as well as University of San Diego, which was my undergraduate alma mater, in their computer security programs. And so we are actively shifting a lot of the curriculum to ensure that those programs include security. I think the cross-disciplinary commentary is critical. It's certainly critical in business when we see, these attacks occur. I think, too, we've got to make it easier for people to cross-train into this work. So the Cyber Pivot Act is a great example of that, where you're not just looking at traditional four-year degrees, but shortening those timeframes. 3, I think we must create competition. And that's not just, college competitions or Hack the Air Force, which are great, but, our adversaries are creating elementary school competitions where cyber competitions are as critical as, ice skating and football is. And so I think that's an area that we really need to look at bringing into. And then 4th, I think, is with technology. I don't think it's the right approach is going to be for us to only look at this as a people workforce challenge. We've got to be able to leverage technology, and in particular AI, to start closing that gap in order to make, the work that people are doing really make them feel like they're having more of an impact. We're taking away some of the repetitive tasks that drive people out of the career field and creating new opportunities to have impact.
General, I don't know if you want to comment on collaborating military and civilian universities together on this issue, but that's the one piece of this that hasn't been commented on.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would. When I first arrived here in 2018, just having left Washington, I was struck by the degree to which there was a degree of suspicion, really, almost between the public sector and the private sector. It was the post-Snowden kind of hangover, and And Raj Shah and Amy Ziegart and I put together what we called a Tech Track 2 dialogue, which is now going strong. And I've seen a tremendous shift in attitude. I think maybe almost especially after the massive reinvasion of Ukraine in 2022, a recognition that there are really still real threats in the world that we have to be concerned about. And so the attitude, I think, is right to maybe even take us to the next level. One of our first Tech Track 2 dialogues, we focused on getting pledges from the private sector and from the military services to vastly increase their exchanges. That happened. And I think that momentum has continued. I think what the Trump administration is doing now in the Department of Defense to make it easier for people who have these extraordinary capabilities to get direct commissions in our services and continue to contribute to their companies, but also contribute to security within government. But of course, we still need really some of our best people, in government, and we have them already. I'm concerned about sort of this shift in a perception of service that it's not quite as hip as being out here in Silicon Valley. Well, actually, a lot of the real hard problems are in government, and it's exciting and challenging. So I think what we have to do is talk to our young people about the tremendous rewards of service, and then make that gateway easier with internships, which I encourage our students here to engage in. Many of them have done that. Many of them are now working for the government in many capacities and self-actualizing and feeling like they're making a contribution. So it's internships, exchanges. These are things we can measure. But also, I think the military model of the reserves is really critical here. We've seen this happen now in terms of our cyber capabilities within cyber units. One of them is at Moffett Field right here. And it allows some of our top people to also contribute in uniform and then to go back to their private sector. So I feel good about that. There are a number of programs here that I've highlighted inside of my statement for the record. So I won't go through all the details. I mentioned Tech Track 2. There's also a tech policy accelerator here at the Hoover Institution, where we are bringing together government, private sector, and figuring out these policy solutions, recommending them. I hope that you'll consider us an extension of, or your staffers will consider us an extension of your staff. And we want to help with this. Also, in terms of educating people, there's the Stanford Emerging Technology Review, which is meant to make the critical technologies, many of which we're talking about here, accessible to the American public. And then in the area of education, I'll provide you some examples of, because education in our country is very, very decentralized. There are some really best practices on getting young people involved in and educated in this area of cybersecurity. Many of them are feeding high school graduates, like in the San Jose area, directly into companies here in Silicon Valley. And so I feel optimistic about it. I think everybody wants us to work. And then the last comment I would make is on education, and Mr. Garbarino mentioned already, Congressman Garbarino mentioned already, his trip to Estonia, this whole idea of the digital citizen. It's tough. I mean, Estonia's a pretty small country compared to ours, but there are best practices there that I think can be scaled up as well.
Mr. Garbarino.
Thank you, Chairman. General, I wanted to ask you, you were National Security Advisor back in 2017, 2018. I know you can't get into specifics, but can you talk about the benefits of the Cyber Information Sharing Act of 2015 and why you think it's probably necessary that it gets renewed, just the importance of that collaboration?
Yes, it's vitally important. I mean, there's no way, as we already mentioned, you can't have all this expertise in-house across the private sector and all these companies that touch critical infrastructure. It's important that when there are breaches of security, that our government is aware of those immediately, so we can work together not only to spread the warning about that, but to help develop those solutions. So I think was an extremely important development. I would also say in that same period, 2017 to 2018, we made some adjustments which I think really helped us tremendously, along with inspired leadership at NSA under General Nakasone, to be much more responsive in recognizing that a good defense requires a good offense. And so, whereas our private sector companies, hey, we can defend all day, but even if you have the best layered defense, if you've got the least privilege in place, if you're in security by design, they're still going to get at you somehow. So every good defense yet has to allow you to shoot down the arrows coming at your surface area, but also to go in and kill the archer. And you can only really get help in doing that by a good partnership and reporting between the public sector and the private sector.
Yeah. And if any of the other witnesses want to talk about the importance of CISA 2015 being renewed, reauthorized, it's great to have it for the record. So when we go to redo it, we have all these people saying wonderful things.
I would certainly agree. Speaking from my time at CISA, I can attest to the importance of making sure that the private sector can collaborate closely with CISA, and protections like in CISA 2015 are essential in making sure that private companies feel comfortable providing that information. One of these initiatives that I'll mention is the pre-ransomware notification initiative that I had the privilege to assist with when I was at CISA, and that's one instance where security researchers are sharing tips with CISA of impending ransomware attacks, such that CISA can notify critical infrastructure owners and operators ahead of those attacks to prevent them from occurring. CISA has prevented thousands of incidents through the pre-ransomware notification initiative, and this really is only possible due to the trust that CISA has built with security researchers, with private companies, and is enabled by acts like the CISA 2015. So I do believe that it's essential that this gets renewed.
Great. I do have a follow-up question for you, Ms. Manfred, but if you all want to talk about CISA real quick, that's fine.
I'll just join and say I agree that it's important to reauthorize.
And also, for the record, Palo Alto Networks is supportive of CISA 2015 as well.
Wonderful. And the second part of our title of the hearing was Streamline Compliance. And Ms. Manfred, you brought it up in your opening testimony about compliance reciprocity. And I really, what do you mean by that? Because it's something that the committee and the chairman has been great. I think he's got the whole committee working on a compliance, a regulatory compliance memo that's going to be released hopefully soon. But it's been a big focus of the committees for harmonization. Yeah.
Harmonization.
Yeah, harmonization. But it's still part of the. So.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So from a harmonization perspective on the regulatory side, both for what we see and for our customers, it is a complicated area that people have to operate in. And so being clear on, thresholds and requirements and making those common as much as possible, and then having that common standard is important. The specific thing that you were asking about with the reciprocity is ensuring that if, you have programs like FedRAMP certification regimes for civilian, you have DoD and their impact levels, and other emerging certifications,
okay.
We want to make sure that there's reciprocity. It is a fair amount of investment for companies to go through these processes, and so you want to make sure that if you go through one and it's the same standard, that is then recognized by those other programs. That's what I was referring to.
Okay, very cool. Thank you very much. Yield back, Chairman.
Well, I deeply appreciate all of you for coming today. The unipolar moment is gone, and we sit in about a battle between, two countries, really. I mean, there are other players that are very important, but I think it's about three things. I think it's about talent management. I mean, if you go and study Confucianism, Neo-Confucianism, and Sun Tzu and all that, I mean, they had these tests for government service, and it's all about talent management. And for us, it's talent management, and the cyberspace is really, that's very important. It's also about alliances and friends when the world becomes a bipolar world. And we have a lot of work to do there. And we have to be very careful about some of the things that we're doing in that regard. And then it's about our economy and how we make our economy powerful. You can't buy tanks, and you buy tanks with GDP. And so, how we spend and how we work as a government, all these things are very, very important. We're doing our best to juggle all of these balls and keep government out of the way and partner where we can. But in this space, in the cyberspace, I'm very focused on harmonizing and getting government out of the way, and getting to a vision where compliance is really done in real time with AI, and no human has to put a single effort toward it because companies like y'all's can do it for us instantaneously. All that effort and energy in the private sector going toward checking the box goes toward real cybersecurity and protecting those entities. So that's something that I'm very passionate about, and all these other things we've talked about today. So again, thank you. What we're going to do now is take a break, and I know there are probably folks in the room who will be joining us for the next phase of this. But the next phase is really about identifying the, critical components so that we can develop courses of action. What can we do? Do we want to outlaw ransomware payments? I mean, I threw that out there not because I was convinced that's the right thing to do, but I mean, we have to have these dialogues. When we sit down and war plan a battle, whether it's taking a hill or, destroying a bridge or denying an enemy this, we sit down and we just brainstorm. I mean, that's what course of action development is. It's well, what could we possibly do? And that's what I hope to do in the next section, is sit down and ask some hard questions. What should compliance really look like? What should we not be worried about? And things like that. So I'm hopeful that our next session will walk away with action steps for us and for yourselves. So again, thank you for being here today. The committee now stands adjourned.